Every single winter, a ski resort places a bet worth tens of millions of dollars. The bet is almost insultingly simple. It is going to snow. If the snow shows up, money flows down the mountain like a river. If it does not, that same mountain can bleed red through an entire season while the bills keep marching in. This is one of the only major businesses on Earth whose survival hangs on the weather in the sky above it, something no owner can control, buy, or command. And that is exactly what makes it such a strange gamble, because the smartest people in this industry have spent the last 20 years quietly figuring out how to win the bet, even in a winter when it barely snows at all. So how does a ski resort actually make its money? And why is owning one such a spectacular roll of the dice? The answer flips almost everything you assume about the business, because a modern ski resort is not really in the business of selling skiing. Not anymore. What it is truly selling and where the real fortunes are won and lost turns out to be something else entirely. Start with the thing nearly everyone gets wrong. When you picture a resort making money, you picture the lift ticket. A skier rolls up, pays a small fortune for a day on the mountain, straps in, and rides. And those day tickets have gotten genuinely absurd. At a top resort, a single walk-up day can now cost well over $200, sometimes pushing past $300. It looks like a gold mine. But the resorts do not really want you buying that ticket. That sky-high price is not there to be paid. It is bait, designed to scare you into buying something else, something that rewired this entire industry. That something is the season pass. Understanding it is the key to understanding the modern ski business. Years ago, one of the biggest resort companies, Vail Resorts, had a realization that reshaped the whole sport. The trouble with selling day tickets is that it chains your income to the weather. Great snow, big crowds, big money. Bad snow, empty slopes, disaster. Your revenue is a hostage to the sky. So they flipped the model. Instead of waiting for skiers to show up in winter and praying for snow, they started selling cheap season passes months in advance in the spring and summer, long before anyone knew what the winter would bring. For a few $100s less than the cost of 2 or 3 day tickets, you could ski all season on what became known as the Epic Pass. Millions of people bought it. Notice the genius of that. By selling those passes early, the resort collects a mountain of cash before a single snowflake falls. The skier has already paid, whether it snows or not, whether they show up 10 times or 0. In one move, the resort transfers the gamble on the weather off its own books and onto millions of customers. That season pass turned a business held hostage by snow into one with a huge pile of guaranteed money locked in before the season even starts. It is why the walk-up ticket costs a small fortune. It exists to make the season pass look like the only sane choice. 2 giant pass programs, the Epic Pass and the rival Ikon Pass, now dominate the industry, each one opening up dozens of mountains, and between them, they have rewired how the entire sport pays for itself. To grasp the scale here, the modern ski business is enormous. In a strong season, it pulls in billions of dollars and logs tens of millions of skier visits, and the largest operators run dozens of mountains across multiple countries. When Vail launched the Epic Pass back in the late 2000s, it sold a flood of them, and a rival group called Alterra had no real choice but to answer with a competing pass of its own, the Ikon Pass. Within a few years, those 2 passes had pulled a huge share of the biggest resorts on the continent into one camp or the other, though a handful of famous independent mountains still refused to join either. That upfront pass money, collected in the warm months before anyone knew whether it would be a good winter, became the bedrock the whole business now stands on. It is the closest thing this weather-cursed industry has ever found to a guaranteed paycheck. That revolution came with a nasty side effect, though, one owners now wrestle with constantly: crowding. When you sell millions of cheap passes, everyone shows up on the same powder days and the lift lines can stretch into an hour-long misery. The very move that rescued the business from the weather created a brand new problem. Too many people, all funneled onto the same slopes by the same cheap pass. Some resorts have started capping how many skiers can come on a given day, or charging extra to reserve parking, quietly trying to manage the flood they themselves unleashed. Push the crowds too far and the experience sours. The loyal regulars grumble, and the magic that justified the whole price begins to fade. Even the parking lot has quietly become a revenue stream. At some busy resorts, a spot near the lifts on a Saturday morning now costs real money, One more small toll on the captive customer who already drove hours to get there. It seems petty, but it captures the entire philosophy of the modern mountain. Wherever there is a choke point and no other option, a price tag is waiting. But do not mistake that clever trick for easy money, because running the mountain underneath it is brutally, punishingly expensive. This is where the gamble bites back. A ski resort is about as capital hungry as a business gets, and most of the cost is fixed, which means it lands on you whether the slopes are packed or empty. Start with the lifts. Those chairlifts and gondolas hauling skiers up the mountain are not simple machines. A single modern high-speed lift can cost anywhere from $5 to $15 million to build and install, and a big resort runs a whole fleet of them. They demand constant maintenance and inspection because they are carrying human beings hundreds of feet in the air, and the safety and insurance costs that ride along with that never stop. You are essentially operating a network of aerial transit lines up the side of a frozen mountain. Then comes the answer to the snow gamble itself: snowmaking. When nature refuses to cooperate, the modern resort manufactures its own snow, and this is a monster of a cost. Snowmaking means an enormous system of pipes, pumps, and machines that swallow staggering amounts of water and electricity to blanket the runs in artificial snow. On a bad weather night, a resort can burn through a fortune in power and water just to keep the mountain open. It is an insurance policy against a warm winter, and a wildly expensive one. But without it, a single bad season can be fatal. And the mountain never sleeps. All through the night, after the last skier has gone home, giant machines called snowcats crawl up and down every run, grooming the snow into that perfect corduroy surface people expect by morning. Each of those machines costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, runs on expensive fuel for hours in the dark, and needs a skilled operator. On top of that sits a small army of staff. Ski patrol, who handle avalanches, rescues, and injuries. Instructors, lift operators, groomers, cooks, cleaners, and cashiers, most of them seasonal, all of them paid. There are hidden costs underneath even those ones most skiers never think about. Take water. All that machine-made snow has to come from somewhere, and the water needed to blanket a mountain is neither free nor unlimited. Resorts fight legal and regulatory battles over the right to pull enough water to make snow. And in a dry region, that fight can decide whether a resort even survives. Then there is the raw electricity. A large resort is one of the biggest power consumers for miles around, running lifts, snow guns, lodges, and lighting around the clock all season. And layered over all of it is the liability. This is a business where paying customers strap hard equipment to their feet and hurl themselves down icy slopes at speed, and where avalanches are managed by literally firing explosives into the snow above the runs. The insurance and safety operations needed to do that responsibly are gigantic, and they never take a day off. Here is a problem that has quietly become one of the biggest threats to the whole model: the people. A resort needs a small army of seasonal workers to run, yet the very success of a ski town tends to price those workers out of it. As the real estate around a popular mountain soars in value, the lift operators, cooks, and instructors who keep the place alive can no longer afford to live anywhere near it. Resorts increasingly have to build or subsidize housing for their own staff just to have enough hands to open the lifts. The same rising property values that make owners rich are strangling their ability to find anyone to do the work. So if skiing barely covers all of that, where does the resort actually turn a profit? Look at what happens the moment you get off the mountain, cold and starving. You walk into the lodge and you are a captive. There's nowhere else to eat, and the resort knows it. That is why a plain burger and fries on the mountain can cost you the same as a full sit-down meal down in the valley. Food and drink on a ski hill carry some of the fattest markups in the business because you cannot exactly ski down to a cheaper option. Rentals, lessons, and branded gear in the shop all stack on top. Skiing is the bait that gets you onto the property. The eating, drinking, learning, and shopping is where a huge slice of the real money quietly gets made. But even that is not the biggest prize. To find where the truly enormous money lives in this industry, you have to look at the ground the resort sits on. Real estate? A successful mountain transforms the land around it into some of the most valuable property in the entire region. A slopeside condo, a chalet with ski and ski-out access, a hotel at the base of the lifts. All of it sells and rents for eye-watering sums. precisely because the mountain is there pulling people in. For many owners, the lifts and the runs are almost a loss leader, a machine that exists to drive up the value of the land and the buildings around it. They are not really selling skiing. They are using skiing to sell real estate, and that is where the true fortunes get built. It also matters enormously what kind of resort you own. A big destination resort, the kind people fly across the world to visit and stay at for a week, earns in a completely different way from a small local hill where families drive up for the afternoon. The destination resort is really a hospitality and real estate empire with a mountain bolted on, earning from hotels, restaurants, and multi-day visitors who spend for days at a time. The little local hill lives and dies on day tickets and passes from nearby families, running on razor-thin margins with almost no cushion. When the industry talks about mountains going dark, it is almost always these smaller local hills, the ones without the lodging, the real estate, or the deep-pocketed owner to ride out one bad year. And the money a single serious skier spends adds up shockingly fast. Between the pass, the gear, the lodging, the lift line coffees, the lessons for the kids, and the pricey mountain dinners, one family can drop thousands of dollars on a single week-long trip, and only a sliver of that ever touches an actual lift ticket. That is the real customer a destination resort is built around. Not the day tripper buying one ride up the hill, but the visitor who parks an entire vacation budget at the base of the mountain and slowly empties it over a week. Because leaning entirely on winter is such a dangerous bet. The sharpest resorts have spent years fighting to break their dependence on the cold. They have pushed hard into summer, turning the same mountain into a warm-weather playground with mountain biking trails, zip lines, hiking, concerts, weddings, and festivals. Every dollar a resort can earn in July is a dollar that does not hinge on whether it snows in January. The goal is to drag a seasonal gamble towards something closer to a year-round business, so that one warm winter cannot wipe out an entire year. All of this power and money has been flowing into fewer and fewer hands, and that shift tells its own story. Over the past couple of decades, a small number of large companies have bought up a huge share of the major resorts and bundled them under those giant passes. For the owners, consolidation brings scale, negotiating muscle, and that steady river of upfront pass revenue. For the small, independent, family-run mountains, it has been a slow death sentence. They cannot match the marketing budgets. They cannot offer a pass that covers 30 other mountains, and they cannot survive a bad snow year with no cushion beneath them. Which carries us to the graveyard, because for all the money at the top of this industry, the mountainside is littered with the bones of resorts that lost the gamble. Across the country, hundreds upon hundreds of ski areas have opened, struggled, and quietly died over the decades. Whole regions are dotted with these lost mountains, places where the lifts have rusted to a halt and the runs have grown back into forest. The reasons are almost always the same brutal mix. A string of warm, snowless winters that gutted the income, costs that kept climbing no matter what the weather did, and bigger, better-funded rivals pulling the crowds away. A small resort with no snowmaking, no summer business, and no deep-pocketed parent is a single bad winter from the end. These are not ancient failures either. Mountains still go dark this way, one warm year at a time. And hanging over the entire industry, over every resort, large and small, is the one force that makes this business more of a gamble with each passing year. A warming climate. Skiing depends completely and totally on cold and snow, and the long-term trend for both is not moving in its favor. Shorter seasons, less reliable natural snowfall, and warmer nights that make even artificial snowmaking harder and costlier. The resorts that survive will be the ones perched at high, cold elevations, armed with massive snowmaking and a strong summer business to fall back on. The ones clinging to low mountains and praying for a cold snap are playing a game the odds are slowly turning against. So how does all of this actually shake out for whoever owns the mountain? It swings wildly. A well-run destination resort under one of the big pass networks, with strong real estate and a real summer business, can be a genuine money machine, throwing off healthy profits year after year. A small, independent hill scraping by on day tickets might earn a modest living in a good snow year and lose money outright in a bad one, with the owner essentially working for love of the mountain more than for the returns. The single biggest variable separating those two fates is how completely the owner has managed to break free from depending on the snow. The more income locked in before winter and earned off the slopes, the safer the business sits. And the more it rides on fresh powder falling right on schedule, the closer it sits to the cliff edge, which carries us right back to the gamble at the heart of it all. A ski resort is, at its core, a bet on the weather dressed up as a business. But the winners of that bet are not the ones who simply hope for snow. They are the ones who have found every possible way to stop needing it. Their money gets locked in with season passes sold before winter. They make their own snow when the sky fails them. Real profit comes from the food, the lodging, and above all the real estate around the mountain. And a strong summer keeps the whole year from riding on a few cold months. The gamble is always there, printed into the sky above every resort. The great operators have just spent decades quietly rigging the game in their own favor. Everyone who never learned how became the rusting lifts and the forgotten runs, slowly vanishing back into the trees. So the next time you're sitting on a chairlift, gliding up over all that expensive snow, you will finally see the real game being played beneath your feet. Before you head off, do me one small favor and drop your location in the comments. It genuinely blows my mind how far these things manage to travel.